Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Ken Frazier, and I chaired the Special Investigations Task Force. If there's one thing that should be abundantly clear, it is that all responsible and caring adults have a fundamental responsibility to safeguard the children in their communities. This morning we received a report from Judge Freeh, and we'd like to thank Judge Freeh for his diligence in uncovering the facts over the past 8 months and for issuing such a comprehensive and thorough report today. Without question, the process that we just underwent with Judge Freeh leading it was critical for all of us if we're to move forward. We needed to understand what happened, to hold the appropriate individuals responsible for their actions and their failures to act, and identify the changes that need to be immediately addressed in our university community. Let me be absolutely clear. An event like this can never happen again in the Penn State University community. Judge Freeh's report is both sad and sobering. He made 3 clear points. First and foremost, we, the Penn State Board of Trustees, failed in our obligation to provide proper oversight of the university's operations. To be absolutely clear again, we are accountable for what's happened here. Our administrative leadership also failed. Judge Freeh's report concludes that at the moment of truth, people who are in a position to protect children and to confront a predator, including people at the highest levels of responsibility in the university, specifically Graham Spanier, Joe Paterno, Tim Curley, and Gary Schultz, did not put the welfare of children first. Also, and importantly, on a personal level, you should know that our hearts remain heavy, and we are deeply ashamed. Over the last 14 years, it appears from the report that there have been 3 distinct phases of the board's involvement. As the report states, the board was completely unaware of what was happening during the first phase, from 1998 to March 2011. We now know that there was inadequate reporting in fact, but there were also inadequate reporting lines and also inadequate oversight by the board. We were put on notice of the Attorney General Sandusky investigation in March 2011. However, we allowed the former administration to characterize to us the issues, and we failed to ask the right questions, the tough questions, or to take definitive action. Put simply, we did not force the issue. However, when the information about Sandusky became more widely public in November 2011, we did take decisive actions involving Judge Freeh and his group as an independent third party to launch a full-scale investigation into the university and the individuals who may have been involved at every level from the top to the bottom. We also took action with respect to the individuals who were most centrally involved. Finally, we also began identifying gaps in governance and implementing changes to strengthen our policies and procedures for the safety of children and our entire university community. This marks a new era for Penn State and for our Board of Trustees. With a mixture of humility and steadfastness, we pledge to work closely and cooperatively with the administration in diligently facilitating open communication across all departments and levels of the university. That will be for the benefit of the children that are on our campus, and it will also be for the benefit of every part of the university. And with that, I'll turn the microphone over to our chairman of the board, Karen Peets.
Thank you, Ken. The Board of Trustees, as a group that has paramount accountability for overseeing and ensuring the proper functioning and governance of the university, accepts full responsibility for the failures that occurred. The board, in cooperation with the administration, will take every action to ensure that an event like this never happens again in our university community. I'd like to reiterate that we're grateful to Judge Freeh for his report and 119 recommendations. And we will be closely studying this document as we continue to push forward in identifying and implementing necessary changes across the entire university. Since I stepped into the role of chair in January of 2012, with the help of my board colleagues, we've made significant improvements in our structure and university oversight. However, we are just beginning. Most recently, we've already started taking a more active and structured oversight role by implementing specific oversight committees, such as risk, audit, legal, compliance, governance, academic excellence, and human resources. Tomorrow, we'll be voting on several new governance initiatives. And for the sake of our students' best interest, we must remain intimately aware of and closely engaged with the university's administration. To this end, we've already begun interacting more closely with members of the President's Council, faculty, staff, students, alumni, and within our committee meetings. We will also continue to seek future opportunities to facilitate these relationships. In addition, we're going to set up some very high goals for ourselves. We must become a best-in-class standard in board governance, and we will keep Judge Freeh's recommendations as our North Star throughout this process. And above all, we must restore trust in our community. We don't expect it to happen overnight. We will earn it back as we move forward and develop a culture of transparency and accountability. And now I'd like to turn the podium over to Rod Erickson, our president.
Thank you, Karen. I, too, was horrified when I learned of the Sandusky allegations last year, and as I've watched the process unfold, it has become clear to me that I need to reconsider our community's leadership culture. Since I assumed the office of president last November, I have committed myself and my administration to addressing this important issue. As Karen noted, my administration has begun to work with the Board of Trustees more collaboratively and productively than any administration in our recent history. We're looking forward to continuing to develop these relationships to facilitate healthy and productive communications and shared accountability between the two. In addition, I have assembled an administrative leadership team charged with developing and implementing an action plan that translates Judge Freeh's recommendations into a comprehensive program for the university. The team is comprised of Tom Poole, Vice President for Administration, David Gray, Senior Vice President for Finance and Business, and Stephen Dunham, pending approval of the board tomorrow, as our new Vice President and General Counsel. The plan will take a few weeks to appropriately research, develop, and approve, but we will provide details as they become available. While in no way lessening our focus on our own failings, we also are committed to helping to build greater awareness of the societal issue of child abuse. We are partnering with the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Rape and have created the Center for the Protection of Children at the Hershey Medical Center. Penn State University intends to be a constructive leader in preventing, reporting, and responding to such abuse. This is a problem that plagues our nation, and we have a special duty to increase awareness, prevention, and treatment of child sexual abuse. With today's report, we can continue the process of addressing the most painful chapter in the university's history. My door is open, and I'm going to be very visible in our community in the coming months. We must work together as we begin picking up the pieces and rebuilding our community to ensure it is safer, stronger, and more student-focused than ever. As the Freeh report notes, Penn State, quote, is an outstanding institution, nationally renowned for its excellence in academics and research, unquote. We are rightly proud of the many significant accomplishments of our faculty, staff, students, and alumni. We also remain proud of the accomplishments of Penn State student athletes over many years, and we reaffirm the fundamental premise that academic excellence and athletic achievement are wholly consistent and complementary goals. Penn State is a leading institution of public higher education in the world. That will remain unchanged. With the help of our students, our faculty and staff, and our alumni, Penn State's best days are in front of us. Penn State will emerge from this as an even stronger and better institution. And now I'll turn the podium back to Karen to direct questions.
Thank you. Thanks, Rod.
Speaks, can we ask you when you and Mr. Fraser and the other members of the board intend to resign?
We are not intending to resign. We believe that we have a natural kind of evolution of the board by the fact that many new members join every year. We think that consistency is important, and we think that many of the things that we just talked about that are needed to strengthen the university and strengthen the future of the board are already in process.
You talked about rebuilding trust in the community.
Yes.
Wouldn't resigning be a big step towards that?
We believe that the stability of the university and what's important is that we now really get going on what needs to be done. We think that by taking the accountability that we just said that we own, that that's the first step. And now we have to follow it through and implement as effectively as we can, as quickly as we can.
Ma'am, are you horrified? The president said he was horrified by the allegations when they came, when it first broke back last year.
Yes.
Are you not horrified today by what Judge Freeh has said about what happened at this university and its inability to protect children that are being victimized?
Absolutely. We are horrified. We're saddened. We are, there are not enough superlative words to use.
Did the board lie in November when it said that it had no idea about a grand jury investigation because a letter that was revealed by Freeh says that Steve Garvin was questioning senior leadership about what was going on campus, and it clearly showed that he knew of something?
I think that as Ken's tried to go through the timeline of what we knew when, I think that the first mistake, as was already mentioned, was not paying enough attention to the articles that came out back in March of 2011. So it's kind of started from there.
But it showed that Garvin knew of those reports.
The report is new. We're just, seeing it. We saw it for the first time today. You can be sure that we'll be digesting further below the 4 people who were already named who knew what.
Another question, should Joe Paterno still be honored at the university?
The whole topic of Joe Paterno being honored or not being honored is a very sensitive topic, as I think everybody's aware, and it's been something that's been dialogued for some time. We believe that with the report's findings, that this is something that will need to continue to be discussed with the entire university community. This is not just a board decision.
Well, what is your reaction to the Paterno aspects of that, given the legend that he had, success with honor and all of that? What, and if anybody else wants to jump in on that, that'd be fine. But what should we make of Joe Paterno today?
Yeah. I think our reaction is that the clarity that's come out of the report would show that 61 years of excellent service that Joe gave to the university is now marred. And we have to step back and say, what does that mean? And I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I'll say this. I think that there's no question that what the report finds is inexcusable failures on the part of Joe Paterno and others to protect children. There's no equivocation about that. But I'd also say that Joe Paterno did a lot of tremendous things in his life, and there's a lot about his life that's worth emulating. So if you try to sum it up, I say you have to measure every human by the good they've done, the bad they've done. I don't think any of us wants to be measured by the worst things we've ever done in our life. I'm not trying to make light of what we've learned in the report. At the same time, though, I would say that if you want to measure the man's life, you have to measure both all the tremendous things that he did, including demonstrating for years the ability to have large numbers of football players at a very high level of athletic prowess graduate at this university. His support of the academic life of this university are all things that have to be considered. So again, I don't think that any one of us wants to be judged only by the worst things that we've done, and I think we have to take some time, we have to take some reflection and some distance before we start making decisions about how we will think about Joe Paterno's entire life and entire body of work.
Why weren't there first questions after the March report came out from the trustees?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question.
Why weren't there more questions when the March 2011 report first came out from the trustees regarding what was going on with this investigation?
Yeah, there was a newspaper article. There was not a report, and then there was a briefing in May of 2011. And in hindsight, and this is the part that probably we're most disturbed about or sorry about, is that we did not pay enough attention. Now, it wasn't detailed, the report in May of 2011, but we should have had our antenna up. We should have been risk managing in a much more active way.
And why weren't you all over President Spanier when this thing came forward? It's the sort of basis of the claims were so horrific. Why didn't the board call the president forward and ask him what the heck is going on inside this university?
Yeah. Well, you can certainly imagine that that's what we did in November. When we had the Attorney General's report in front of us, the presentment, he was called on the carpet. You can be sure of that. Again, in hindsight, and that's always 2020, we wish we had had more active dialogue at that time.
Do you feel that the report mentioned a trustee that did ask some questions of President Spanier on this? Who is that trustee?
We're not clear because we haven't had a chance to study the timing in the report. We're not clear what the time frame was, whether that was actually in November. Okay, so we just haven't had a chance to kind of sort that all together, and we'll figure that out.
Can I also make it clear in response to the last question? The premise that we didn't ask President Spanier about that is incorrect. We did ask President Spanier questions. We got answers. I think what we can be blamed for in hindsight is we didn't probe more deeply after we got the first set of answers.
Jan? Do you feel that you got all the answers to the questions you had whenever you started this investigation, and if not, what areas were left unaddressed in this report?
Go ahead.
I think Judge Freeh did a very thorough and complete report. I think, as he stated today, it would have been better had he had the opportunity to speak with some of the central characters in the narrative who couldn't speak to him either because, on advice of counsel, they were not willing to speak to him, and also, lamentably, he did not have a chance to interview Coach Paterno before he passed away.
Governor Tom Corbett was on the board when all this was happening. He was the Attorney General when the investigation started. Was there not more questioning of him about the events that were unfolding, and did he not come to the board to give any kind of indication that there was a very serious matter that needed attention?
Actually, it is typical for the governor, it is in our bylaws, that the governor sits on the board for the Penn State. And so it was very typical and logical for him to be in board meetings. The fact that he had been the AG beforehand, he did not bring that information forward, nor would we have expected him to do that in that role.
When you say accountability, what does that mean?
Accepting full accountability from our perspective means that not only are we taking the blame, if you will, for these events, but we are also very determined, as I said earlier, to fix those governance, typically, that's really the umbrella that it falls in, is governance, that it becomes much more active at the university in those different topics that I was talking about.
Do you think there's a need for John Surma and Steve Garvin, who were the leaders of the board at the time that this all happened, for them in particular to step down?
The report includes some information about individuals, and we have yet to have a chance to explore all of the details on that since we just received it this morning.
There are 32 trustees. Is that too many to do this job effectively? And are none of the 32 stepping down?
A couple have already changed. As you know, we have 4 new trustees, one of whom is from the agricultural function, and 3 which were identified and elected from the alumni. So that's the natural change that happens every year. 32 is a big group, but the great news about it is it's a very diverse group. So between the elected alumni, the agricultural representatives, the business and industry, as well as the governor's appointees, we think that that diversity makes the dialogue stronger.
With all the information that the report says Spanier did not tell you, do you feel misled by him? And if so, what is that like?
I would say that we feel concerned and misled in the entire situation. Although we're taking responsibility, we did not withhold that information. And so each of the individuals, I would say, have let us down significantly.
In your opinion, should he be charged?
I don't have an opinion about that. I think that the legal process will take its due.
Question for Rodney Erickson. Judge Freeh says that in '99 you were uncomfortable giving Sandusky emeritus status. Why? What made you uncomfortable about it?
Well, simply because emeritus status is typically reserved for professors of the rank of associate or professor, associate professor or professor, and this came in as a request for an assistant professor to be given emeritus status. But it was clear when the request came in to my office that President Spanier had already waived. Created the exception, and so it was simply processed on that basis as an exception. The president has the ultimate authority to grant or not grant emeritus status.
Mr. Frazier, you said that it's not true that the board did not ask questions of Spanier when this thing broke. You said you didn't ask enough questions or the right questions. What do you, in hindsight, wish you'd asked him? The most important question you'd asked him to get to what happened here?
Well, I don't know that it was a question of different questions so much as I think we took at face value the answers. I'm saying it another way. I think we had a huge degree of trust in Graham Spanier, who had been the president of this university for 16 years. And when we asked what was going on, and we were assured that there were no particular issues that the board needed to be concerned about. We were also being told that there were restrictions based on grand jury secrecy about what could be said at a particular point in time. I think, in retrospect, we were, frankly, not appropriately pushing to get deeper answers about those 2 questions. But I don't know that there were different questions so much as asking again and again, is there nothing more that we haven't been told?
Huge report, this horrific report, this description of this storied university. Now what are your thoughts about what you'd wished you'd asked? Specifically, what do you wish you'd asked him to break through?
I can't answer that question because I don't think it was a question of asking the wrong questions. I think it was a reticence about sharing the information. It's not a question of if we'd asked a magic question, these folks would have said, okay, we're not going to conceal what's going on. Now that you asked it that way, we'll answer it a different way.
Have any Penn State employees been dismissed or asked to resign since the Freeh report has come out, and is that something under consideration?
I don't believe anyone's been asked to resign since the report came out this morning.
For President Erickson, what's the status of Mike McQuarrie at this point?
Mr. McQuarrie was under a fixed-term contract that as an assistant coach, that contract ended on June 30th, 2012, so his contract simply ended at that point. When any new coach comes in, as Coach O'Brien did, he or she, depending upon the sport, is always, of course, given the opportunity to put their own staff together.
And what's the status of Tim Curley?
Let's not get ahead of ourselves here. We've just had the report for a matter of a few hours, and certainly any employment relationships with the university will be handled in the days ahead.
Do we have any other questions? Sir?
Yeah, you said you wished you would have pressed Spanier more. That one trustee who emailed Spanier wanted full disclosure, and Spanier knew that. Why didn't anyone back him up?
Well, first of all, you're assuming in your question that the rest of the trustees were aware of that exchange, which is an assumption. Excuse me, sir, don't interrupt me. I'll finish my answer, and then you can ask your next question. You're assuming in your question that the other trustees were aware of that colloquy between that trustee and President Spanier, which is not true at the time. I'll make the point again for everybody to understand. In retrospect, we wish we had pressed upon someone that we had complete trust in. The questions were asked, the answers were given, they were not complete, thorough, open answers. We could have asked more questions, but again, I want to say it's not simply a question of us finding a magic formulation of the question. We asked enough questions that if someone wanted to share what was going on, they could have shared what was going on. Am I clear?
Do we have any other time for two more questions?
How many current board members were on the board back in 1998 and 2001?
Couldn't give you that data.
There are
Yeah, we'll have to get it for you.
Can I ask, why did the board have...
those board members to resign?
We are indeed voting on term limits tomorrow.
Why did the board have so...
There's another one over here.
Why did the board have so much trust in Graham Spanier, and should any board ever have that much trust in a president?
I think that it is a classic issue of governance, and I think a great analogy is noses in, fingers out, which is a good way to govern.
I also think it's important, and again, in hindsight, we would have done things differently. But there is a distinction between board oversight and management. The president of the school has an obligation to make sure that the school is run in an appropriate way. And before this issue arose, I think Graham Spanier was one of the most respected college presidents in the United States. I would say that we were delighted as a board to have Graham Spanier as our president. We trusted him based on all external appearances. We believed we were being told what was accurate. In retrospect, we were not told what was being accurate. And so I am saying in retrospect, I wish we had probed more, but it wasn't, again, that there was any reason for us to not show the trust that we placed in President Spanier.
Judge Freeh in his report concluded that there was a cultural problem at Penn State University, and one of those cultural problems was a reverence for the football program that perhaps superseded everything else.
I think that's...
Do you agree with that assessment, and how will that change, and do you think other universities with large athletic programs should take note of this?
President Erickson.
I think we should be careful that we don't paint the entire football program over a long period of time with a single brush. This particular tragedy happened significantly within the football program, but it could have happened in many other places. These things happen in schools, they happen in churches, they happen in youth camps all over. The question is really, were there particular aspects about the football program that allowed some of these things to continue on? And we will certainly look at that. But football has been an important part of the university. It's been an important part of student life, an important part of alumni life. It's been an important part of our whole educational process here. Again, the idea that you can have academic excellence and athletic excellence that coexist. But certainly we want to take a look at all aspects of our culture here, not just football culture, but all aspects of our culture, to see that we have in place the proper safeguards, the proper oversight, the proper accountability that will prevent something like this from happening again at the university.
How do these findings today impact the inquiries by the NCAA and the Department of Education, and a timeline? Where do things stand with those inquiries?
Those investigations will continue. The NCAA will be, I'm sure, as their statement indicates, working through the report of Judge Freeh, and we'll have an opportunity to respond to the letter that I received from Dr. Emmert back in November of last year. Now that we have Judge Freeh's report, we're in a much better position to respond to the list of questions that Dr. Emmert sent us at that point, and we will be doing so over the course of the next several weeks. But other.
Thank you very much.